Okay. Well, good morning to everyone. Today, I'm very happy to have Rowan Logie with me from New Energy Technology. As we know, hydrogen is all the buzz, a renewable energy source. And Rowan and his colleagues have started this initiative with a view to really getting involved in that space and exposing investors to I suppose, a diversified portfolio of hydrogen investment interests. So Rowan, welcome. Just so our audience knows that this is a recording that will be posted on our investment website called Entrepreneur Australia, and it can be seen at entrepreneuraustralia.com.au alongside with various other investment opportunities that we showcase. Without further ado, Rowan, can I ask you to introduce yourself, talk about your team, backgrounds, why have you sort of kicked off this initiative, and any information that you think relevant before we get into some questions about the company and the industry, etc.
Sure. Hi, Doug. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss this exciting venture. So, yeah, Rowan Logie is my name, and I've been in the renewable space for about a decade. Previous to that, management consulting. So I've helped about 70 businesses take technologies out to market and businesses out to market, grow and scale. My co-founder here, Greg Stace, who's based in Switzerland, grew one of Switzerland's largest solar companies. Our CTO was the CTO previously of one of the world's leading renewable microgrid companies. And our CFO has founded a couple of renewable businesses as well. We have some advisors, I'll get to them in a bit, but really the basic purpose of what we're trying to do here is accelerate the shift towards net zero by unlocking the hydrogen value chain. It is a very exciting space, you're right. We absolutely agree. We've done a deep dive on this over a long period, and our view is that hydrogen will be central in the new energy landscape by the middle of the century and long before that. We're seeing authorities around the world confirm that, from Bank of America to BP and Australia's chief scientist, the International Energy Agency. So lots of different authorities agree hydrogen will be right in the middle of the new energy world at net zero. With it, we can get to net zero because it fills all the gaps of intermittent renewable power. Renewable power is great, but you can't store it, you can't transport it, and you know it comes and goes. So green fuel, which is green hydrogen or green ammonia, we'll get to that in a minute, solves all of those gaps and helps us get to net zero.
Okay.
So I mean the exciting space is there, but a lot of people would like investment exposure to infrastructure in the space, to projects, but it's just too early for that. We are probably 5 years away from any sort of serious commercial scale construction in the space. There are a number of sort of pilot projects and early stage trials happening now, but they are to prove out technology. They're not genuine commercial infrastructure projects. So really where the space is at now is at the opportunity now for investors is in technology. But even the technology is fairly early stage. And so, you know, if investors want to get exposure to the space through technology, which is really only way now, you sort of have these two choices of either you get into a major, a Toshiba or a Mitsubishi or FMG, but really only 0.00 something of their portfolio is in hydrogen. So you're not really getting good exposure there, and you don't get multiples that way. But if you want to take the other option of try to pick a winner, well, I can tell you there's hundreds of early stage hydrogen technology ventures. And, you know, we're a team of experts in the space, and we're not even backing ourselves to pick the winner. So we want a portfolio. And even then, you know, you really want, you know, those experts to do the assessments and pick them. And you want people to help commercialize them out to market, because the market's evolving. It's early stage and complex.
Yeah, Rowan, can I jump in there? So firstly, it's a fascinating industry. Renewable energy per se is massive globally and gaining momentum. I just want to say to listeners who are listening and viewing this presentation that there is a pitch deck that you can download on entrepreneuraustralia.com.au. Specifically under opportunities, go to the new energy technology opportunity that's shown there, and you can read about it and pull down the the pitch deck, and you can request a detailed information memorandum. So I know that we're sharing a lot of information, but it is there and it's set out very beautifully. So not running ahead too much and confusing people, I can see that in talking to a number of potential investors and parties that are trying to get their heads around the space, that their eyes glaze over just a little when you talk about green hydrogen. So can I ask you just to, before we get into some more detail around the structure and the industry, etc., just clarify that simple term, green hydrogen. What is that?
Absolutely, it is a little confusing, and there is a lot of media hype at the moment around this space, but trying to understand the underlying technology and the underlying dynamics is a little bit tricky. So yeah, let me walk you through that. Thanks, Doug. So the way we make so I guess we've got to first answer so there's green hydrogen, but actually we see hydrogen infrastructure globally not being really ready for 10 to 15 years. There is no ship now that can take hydrogen from Australia to Japan, for instance. There just isn't one. There's a long way to go before we're ready at scale. So the alternative now is ammonia. So ammonia actually surprisingly contains about 50% more hydrogen than liquid hydrogen does. Just because the molecule of NH3, the ammonia molecule, packs 3 hydrogen atoms in really tightly. So plus, if you want to transport or store hydrogen, you have to cool it to near Kelvin, minus hundreds of degrees, and pressurize it to a lot of atmospheres. That's very expensive. It kills the economics to have to do that. Also, the hydrogen molecules are very sneaky, so they leak out of storage containers for shipping containers and so forth rapidly. So you lose a lot of product that way. Whereas ammonia, you can transport and store at room temperature, room pressure. Much easier to handle. In fact, we've been doing it for 100 years. There's a couple 100 million tons of ammonia shipped, trucked, ported, trained, traded every year. It's for fertilizer. That's our main fertilizer. So we understand it really well. So we see ammonia as being the green fuel, if you like, instead of hydrogen for the next decade and a half. So we're really interested in that. So when we ask, when you ask sort of what is green fuel, how do you do it? What is green hydrogen? We talk about green fuel, which could mean green ammonia or it could mean green hydrogen. Right now, we think green ammonia is the more exciting one. So you make it basically out of water, air, and renewable electricity, which sounds a bit like a dream, but we do have the technology to do that now. At the moment, the way we've been making green ammonia for the last 120 years is out of LNG, out of natural gas, fossil fuels. So we suck the hydrogen out of LNG, which releases lots of carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So that's really bad. We've got to replace that process first of all, and then you get that hydrogen and you put it in a ruthenium tank, which is a really expensive precious metal. You heat it up to 700 degrees and 170 atmospheres, and you put it under this intense pressure and heat to force the hydrogen and nitrogen together, and that's how you get ammonia, basically. Again, really, really expensive. The electricity required to do that, huge, kills the economics again. And
renewable electricity, and in your pitch deck, under that sort of section, you've got a graphical illustration where you've got in your graphic wind and solar. So from the electrical point of view, my understanding is that the green hydrogen requires quite a lot of electricity. So does it suggest?
That's right.
Does it suggest that access to that electricity, preferably renewable, otherwise it defeats the objective if it's coal-powered, fossil fuel-powered generated electricity, has to be available. You need to have access to sufficient wind and solar electricity or other source of electricity.
That's exactly right, Doug. And you need a lot of it, to make the economics work, a huge amount. And it takes a huge amount of electricity to produce a fairly small amount of green fuel.
Yes.
That's okay as long as you have scale. And that's why we see, Andrew Forrest announcing he's going to build 235 gigawatts. Well, to give you an idea, Australia's total power grid is about 40 gigawatts. So, Twiggy wants to be bigger than Chevron, but in green fuel.
Okay.
So that's the kind of scale. You don't need to be that big to make it work. But you do need to be big. So the Asian Renewable Energy Hub are talking about 20, 30 gigawatts. Sun Cable are talking about similar. Pilot Energy are talking about multiple gigawatts. So we've got BP, Yara. Many of the majors are talking about gigawatt scale. To give you an idea, the biggest renewable project in the world is about one gigawatt.
Yes.
And so we are going to need hundreds of gigawatts to do this. Western Australia is ideally positioned to do that, actually. We have one of the world's top 3 locations for daytime sun and nighttime wind. And when you get that combination, you can get consistent electricity from sun and wind combined. And that gives you uptime on the assets, enables you to run the green fuel production kit a lot of the time, which means it makes the economics work pretty well. Also, we have lots of experience in commodities, in energy exports, infrastructure, and most importantly, we've got the energy customers already who have announced their net zero ambitions. And so they need the product from us.
Right.
Japan, Singapore, they don't have enough land to put wind and solar to produce green fuel. So they're going to have to look to us. We're ideally positioned to be a superpower in this space.
Okay. Now, it is becoming a increasingly and rapidly populated space. There are a number of listed companies here in Australia alone, let alone the world. You mentioned, Andrew Forrest, and there's various other similar parties to him that are finding their way into the space very quickly in a very meaningful way. So what is the problem that you seek to solve, or what need do you seek to meet in putting new energy technology into place?
Good question. Yeah, and a fair enough question. We don't want to waste our time here. So we're doing something which we think is really critical. Building the renewable energy generation will leave to those with big balance sheets. That makes sense. We don't want to compete with that. But turning that electricity into green fuel, none of these majors have the technology for that yet. So the technology I described a few minutes ago with the ruthenium tank and 700 degrees and that sort of stuff, that's not going to work to produce green ammonia, green hydrogen. You could maybe use that for some of it, but it's not going to work because it takes 2 days to heat up and pressurize. If the sun comes and goes or the wind comes and goes, it's not compatible. So what we need is new technologies to produce that green fuel out of the renewable power. Now, none of those majors have that technology yet. So that's a choke point in the whole value chain. So we've got people willing to build the renewables. We've got companies majors looking to build their ships and ports and pipelines and stuff. And downstream, we've got lots of fuel cell businesses that are fairly advanced. But there's a couple of choke points, and one of them is right there, turning the power into green fuel. And so we have a couple of technologies that we've found. We've scoured the world, with decades in the energy space right around the world. We have pretty good networks globally. We've worked in the US, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. And so with our tentacles out wide, we've looked at hundreds of technology candidates, looked closely at over 100, looked through the data rooms of 50, talked to many, and ruled most of them out, of course, as you do. But we found what we think are the 2 most advanced, most exciting green fuel production technologies in the world. And we've managed to get signed terms to acquire stakes in those businesses and commercialization rights. So that will enable us to help take those out to market and then get the benefit of the multiples at the back end.
All right, so there are 2 aspects there. Firstly, your business model strikes me as being one where you firstly make an investment, you go through the process of detailed, in-depth due diligence, investigation and the like, which brings to the fore the extensive expertise and skills that your team have quite clearly got. and they're a very impressive team. You then have a portfolio sort of approach to it, where you are approaching it from a diversification, a portfolio theory of diversification, management of risk, etc., for incoming investors. But the part that I found particularly interesting in all of that is the commercialization element, because you have secured options, I guess, to invest in these two companies you refer to. And they have teams of their own, and clearly they would not be sort of venturing down the path that they have if they did not have some understanding of how to commercialize what they were doing. So do you believe that that is a very key part of the core capability that you bring, and that you can augment those teams? And just to add to that, in your documentation, you refer specifically to commercialization in Australia, Asia. I think you might have even suggested Africa, but maybe not. So the commercialization piece really intrigued me. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, thanks. It is an unusual way to approach this sort of activity. So it is good to talk a bit more about that. But just first, you mentioned the team again, and I've only introduced the sort of the executive team. Let me introduce the other four team members as well. So Andrew Leibovich was the general manager of Woodside's multi-billion-dollar browse project. We also have Stephanie, who's a very unusual set of capabilities. So she has spent 7 years leading hydrogen technology development ventures. So very unusual. Not many people in the world have been in that space and led projects like that. She was at Ballard Power, one of the world's leading hydrogen tech companies. We've got Glenn, who set up Shell's new energy division, so their renewable power division globally. And we've got John, who's a couple of decades in intellectual property law, specifically in new technologies, and has a chemistry degree. So yes, you're right. The team that's come around this, I mean, I'm really humbled by it. And as you say, that you're right that the core capability of that team is in taking technologies out to market. So even the oil and gas guys, Andrew and Glenn, they were in unconventionals mostly. So yes, the Shell for 20 years, at Woodside for 10, whatever, but mostly they're in unconventional products and unconventional markets. So the idea, all of us have capability. I mean, between us, we've founded 23 startups, mostly in new energy technology. We've worked in almost every energy market around the world, and taken new energy products out to market, like microgrids, like solar, like offshore wind, like batteries, like also compressed air, pumped hydro. A lot of these clean energy we've been on the front end of for well over a decade. So we do understand this space pretty well. To answer your so deep question about the commercialization, that's really the capability this team has. Yes, we've got experience in investments and divestments and DD and all that sort of thing, but the core activity of this business, the mechanism for value creation, is that we're able to take these ventures from the lab out into market to scale. We've got lots of experience doing that. We know exactly how to do that, and we have the market contacts, we have the understanding, the insights, the relationships, and the modeling to do that. So just to give you an example, so Starfire, one of the technologies we've got terms with to acquire equity in, they've been producing about 10 kilograms a day of green ammonia already through last year, connected to a solar farm. So they've cracked it. They've cracked the technology, which is super exciting. I mean, that is a game changer for the green fuel value chain overall. Yes. Very exciting. And since we came on board with them a year ago, along have come Chevron. They're now in. Along have come Osaka Gas and Power, huge Japanese power company, and along have come Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, again, huge. So these co-investors really see the value in this technology. They see the game changing, the disruptive power of being able to produce green ammonia, green fuel out of renewable electricity. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah. What we can do for a company like that is, I mean, when you're taking technologies out to market, it can be difficult to find your first market entry, if you like, your first commercial application, first commercial pilot project or commercial project. And especially because you've got technology risk and people don't like investing in a pilot project only to have it go go sideways. So you've got tech risk, but in energy, you've also got safety risk and you've got supply risk as well. So whoever's hosting, they want to be able to rely on the power. So you've got a number of layers of risk because it's quite difficult to get new projects up and away when you've got all that risk. So we've been doing this for a while. So we know some strategies that we've developed with some sophisticated European risk product offerings. So Swiss Re, Ariel Re, Argo, a number of risk players. So we've got them all together and we've created a system of a back-to-backing, a kind of tiered stratified insurance wrap around a new project, so that a host company can comfortably invest in it or comfortably host it, and then we could even get third-party finance. So to give you an example, so Atmonia, which is the other technology we have signed terms with, they're based in Iceland. Now, we have previously done quite a bit of consulting work for one of Germany's largest utility companies, EnBW. They have a number of coal and nuclear plants there, and we've consulted to them on their renewables transition and decarbonisation. Now, they came to us about 6 months ago and said, we've got a bunch of big wind farms all around Europe, and we're seeing deep negative pricing. So in other words, when you have to pay to push your power into the grid. We've seen a little bit of it in Perth, not much, but it started, and we'll see more and more of that as we get more wind and solar in the system. So they've said we've got deep negative pricing for right over winter in Europe, sustained conditions. We're bleeding. We're out of ideas. Have you got any ideas? Can you get back to us? So we said, actually, we do have an idea. Why don't we bring one of these green fuel production kits to each wind farm? And when you've got negative pricing, you use your power to produce green ammonia.
Right. Okay.
And then instead of sending it to the grid at negative prices, you use it to produce green power. And then you can either ship that ammonia offsite, or you can turn it back into power and sell that when power is peaking, say, at 100 times normal cost. So you're not going to get rich off this, but it's a defensive play. Now we've modeled all this stuff for EnBW and we've given them all the documentation. They said, yeah, great, we will host a pilot project. No worries, let's do it. And because of that, but then the next question comes is, how do we finance that? Often a new venture would have to sell more shares to finance their first project. So a dilution event. We don't like that. We prefer to keep our equity. So this risk wrapping enables us to find financing that's non-dilution financing. So we get to keep we get someone else to pay for the pilot project, basically. In this case, EnBW would be happy to, but actually because of our networks, we found an explosives company that are doing now scope 3 decarbonisation, and the main input is ammonia. So they're looking for now green ammonia. Now you can't get any. So they've said to us, look, we want to accelerate this. We're happy to finance as a third party this EnBW pilot project with the Atmonia technology. Now, that's the kind of commercialization activity that we will be doing. So that's executive strategy and operational strategy. So we'll be rolling up our sleeves, deeply involved. We get emails from the CEOs of both of these companies on a regular basis, weekly, fortnightly. In fact, later today, I've got a call with the CEO of Starfire who contacted us a few days ago and said, oh, we found a new technology. Maybe we could swap it out for one of our off-the-shelf parts. Do you know them? Do you know any others? Let's have a workshop about it to see where you guys think the cost could come in here, because you've probably done the modeling already. So, they see us as part of the strategy team. We really are involved in the commercialization. Now, we don't want to just get day rates for that or licensing fees. We want to capture multiples. That means we need the equity. So the equity is just our mechanism for capturing the value that our commercialization creates.
Yes. Okay, so that's a good segue to the investor sort of discussion component here. I must say that a few words jumped out for me there. Ammonia, oxygen, explosives, and insurance. Clearly, one can package that all.
It's a dangerous game. Don't do this at home.
It's a dangerous game, particularly talking about vehicles, I guess. Be that as it may, I know that smart guys will take care of all of those things and work it all out. Now, from an investment point of view, just to be clear, you are seeking to raise 5 million now. You're into that raise as we speak, with a view to an ASX listing later this year. I really like the ASX listing sort of part of the story, because it gives clients and investors and the like that opportunity to enjoy liquidity in their investment, come and go, enjoy the multiples, etc. that you speak of. From the bit that I know as well, I don't think there's a company of a very similar nature like yours at a startup level that will be investing in these very exciting early stage, early growth opportunities globally. You know, some will shoot the lights out, hopefully more than not, but it is a nice opportunity for investors to get involved. Now, from an investment point of view, people can invest now. The offer is still open. Ordinary shares I think they're being issued at 10 cents per share at the moment.
That's right.
Minimum investment amount, Rowan, what is that amount? Just remind me.
We set it provisionally at 100K, but that's flexible. We're taking investments down to 2025.
Okay, all right, that's good. And if I'm an investor, why should I be particularly excited about getting involved in new energy technology now at this stage?
I think, yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, you got the numbers on the financials there, right? 5 million now, 4 million of which, by the way, goes straight out to the technologies. The 1 million is just for ops and runway to IPO. And then at IPO, yeah, we're looking for a 20 million there this year. That's exactly right. Thanks, Doug. So why us? I mean, to come back to those points, you know, it is an exciting space. You know, the independent forecasts are that greenfield demand by middle of the century will be about 1.5 times current LNG demand. Absolutely enormous, absolutely enormous. Right in the middle of the new energy landscape. That's where greenfield will be. You can't get access to infrastructure now. You get nothing really by investing in majors. Startups are highly risky because you've got complex technical assessments required, and you've got really early stage emerging market complexity as well. So people don't really know how these things are going to shape up. You really want a team of experts who understand energy and technology and hydrogen really well to do better guesses than you. And secondly, you want those people to be able to navigate as the market emerges and as the technologies emerge to help with that commercialization through that dynamic emergence in an agile and value-adding way. So people who can bring the technologies out to the relationships they already have, to the projects they already know. So, you know, we're in discussions with all of the major projects here in Australia for green fuels, and the Philippines, Malaysia, Morocco, Chile, and Europe, and some in Europe too. So we're already in discussions with all these folks. We feel, we know they've got appetite for these technologies. We know they have to solve these. So we want to have those solutions. I think for investors to get exposure, you know, we're offering a way to do that in a way that is intelligent, really. Gives exposure now, early, but gives intelligent exposure. All
right. And the type of investor that you're specifically looking for, is there a type of investor? Clearly, we all know that investors differ from retail through to sophisticated professional, high net worth, super high net worth, institutional, etc. Have you identified a particular type of investor that you would like to have on your register?
So we have about half of the 5 million already in this raise, and that's a mix, actually. It's a mix of high net worth, retail, funds, family offices. We're comfortable with a range. You know, we have a couple of funds that we think are nice strategic partners, and so they're valuable. But I think people want, you know, all different types of investors are telling us they want some exposure in this space. And we don't see why we can't offer that. We're comfortable offering that.
All right. Well, Rowan, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I must say, just listening to you and thinking about what you're saying as you speak, this really, I suppose, underlines the reason why we conduct this type of discussion or interview, because the way you've come across and your level of knowledge is extremely compelling. And if I was going to tip some money in and want to back some smart guys who are dealing with hydrogen and looking for the best opportunities around the world, you would certainly be at the front of that queue. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insight and understanding. It's very evident. We wish you and your team every success, and we invite potential investors to contact us at entrepreneuraustralia.com.au. My contact details are there, and let's back you on this wonderful new venture. So thank you for your time, Rowan. Thank you to your team for the foresight and the bravery to step into this world.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. And yeah, please join us on this journey to net zero by unlocking the green fuel value chain.
Thank you, Rowan. Best regards and have a wonderful day.
Enjoy your day. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers now. Bye.